This character analysis video is a unique one because it will be the only video in the entire series to feature two characters, the characters of course being Basilio and Fidelio. I feel that the brothers Magnus are inextricably linked, perhaps more so than any other two characters within Metaphor ReFantazio's narrative, and thus, it's only right that they share an analysis video. There's a reason these characters resonate so much with most people who've played this game, which is actually reflected in an ongoing poll Atlas is doing where fans can rate their favorite Metaphor ReFantazio characters. Basilio literally ranks first outside of the main characters of this story's narrative, and Del ranks ahead of all the other minor characters in the story, and even ahead of some of the main ones. Of course, I've also seen some of you in our comments section asking for the brothers Magnus, so it's only natural that I listen and we run with this. Stick around to gain a new understanding of Bas and Del. Let's head back to Uchronia and discuss. I think it makes the most sense to start with the how. How did the brothers Magnus come to be? For lack of a better term, Fidelio and Basilio were street rats as children. They had no parents and lived on the streets with nothing. At some point, Basilio went to enlist in the army so that they could have a better life, but he was rejected due to his age. The military then instead referred them to the Igniter Development Facility, where they told them that they would be helping to test igniters before the soldiers got them. What they didn't divulge was that they would be testing the igniters on them, meaning an entire generation of poor therapists with nowhere else to go were subjected to horrific experiments. Experiments where whether they lived or died didn't matter because unfortunately poor therapists were not in short supply. They received slave wages and room and board amidst these circumstances, which persuaded many therapists to stay and just suffer through the circumstances, as they deemed this to be better than the alternative, which was free on the streets but with nothing and struggling for basic human needs every single day. Clearly, all of the choices available for these therapists were dreadful. The experiments they underwent impacted every therapist involved in a variety of ways, ranging from physical to psychological, and left lasting scars assuming they managed to somehow survive. Basilio, for example, has lasting chest pains that he needs to treat with varying remedies, and Fidelio actually had his growth severely stunted as a result of the experiments, which is why he is Napoleonic in nature, or in other words, short as fuck. Eventually, Basilio reached death's door due to the experiments, and that's when Fidelio spurred into action and sprung their escape and managed to carry Basilio to a church. I want to pause here and point out that this is the first showcase of the Achilles heel, so to speak, when it comes to Fidelio's character. In spite of his nigh unrivaled IQ and perception, Fidelio is only able to take significant action when he sees his little brother in danger. He lacks a little bit of drive and ambition and maybe a bit of courage. If you think about it, Fidelio has the intangibles to be a candidate in the tournament for the throne himself, yet he settles for continuing to work under Lord Luis. This is actually one of the things I find most endearing about Fidelio, which is that at every turn of his life, he basically sacrifices everything that he could be just so that he can solely live a life that keeps Basilio as safe as possible. Remember, it's said countless times in the story that when they were younger, Del basically kept Basilio alive day to day and basically raised him. Without the burden of Basilio, who knows what Del could have accomplished. He is a true model example of what an older brother should be in the context of a brotherhood. To return to their origin story, it was at the church where they met Rella and she managed to heal them. I also believe this is where the seeds for their compassion for others was planted, not just alone through Rella's actions, but from the counsel she gave them. Rella said to Basilio and Del, "What is like now, it's not all there is. If you keep living, the world will surely change." If you consider the arc of their lives, it would be fair to question why they care about anybody at all. When they were born into the streets with no parents, food, or shelter, were then tricked into horrific experiments, and then eventually joined Luis's army. And of course, Luis's whole mantra is that strength is the sole barometer for a person's right to live. Well, clearly the only thing we can point to aside from their nature is this brief encounter and experience with Saint Rella. I'd argue that her actions to save them in spite of her owing them nothing and knowing nothing of them, and then her words of wisdom, served as the foundation for them existing afterwards as fairly respectful people even under Luis's employ, and their eventual betrayal of Luis way down the line. I think this point is corroborated by Vinca's character arc. I believe Vinca is meant to show us how the brothers Magnus may have turned out had Del not sprung him and Basilio and had they not encountered Saint Rella. Vinca never escaped the Igniter facility. He was tortured until the end and mistakenly tossed out with the corpses. But he survived, and so when we meet Vinca, he is filled with righteous hatred towards the world and actively murdering upper-class people with a hand in the Igniter business. He's a serial killer. Vinca's arc also serves to showcase that Basilio is an independent thinker in spite of his notion that Del did all the thinking for them, as Basilio rejects joining his long-lost childhood friend in the murdering, in spite of the hatred they both share towards the upper-class Igniter businessman. What's interesting about this is that at one point Vinca says that Del would have supported him, and while you might recoil at the thought, part of me wonders if Vinca has the right of it. Fidelio is a fiercely loyal individual to his people, and supporting Vinca or looking the other way would have been the path of least resistance, or most likely to keep Basilio safe. So I don't think this is too far-fetched, but in this scenario Basilio still would have been present, and again, we've seen time and again that Basilio is an independent thinker who consistently voices the truths he feels in his innermost moral barometer. So while I don't think the Brothers Magnus would have supported Vinca, I do think that he kind of has a right of it when it comes to that specific statement. I want to switch gears here and talk about symbolism, as I feel the symbolism of the brothers kind of connects to the recent points I've made. So, when it comes to the name of the Magnus brothers, Fidelio Aureus Magnus and Basilio Lupus Magnus, I believe the key symbolism here comes from lupus for Bas and Fidelio for Del. Basilio's is lupus, which means wolf, and I've deduced it to indicate lone wolf, and the name Fidelio stems from the Latin word fidelis, which means loyalty or faithful. Now, gleaning the meaning of Fidelio's name is quite simple. To expound, like I mentioned, fidelis means loyalty or faithful. The foundation of Fidelio's life is his loyalty and caretaking of Basilio. That is the one thing that has been at the core of his being at every stage of his existence. Additionally, Fidelio has a loyalty to Luis where he reveres him to the point that he kind of views him as a religious figure. In spite of the constant moral red flags, he's never able to reject his faith until a moment that would become the very end of his life. Fidelio or fidelis being synonymous with loyalty isn't particularly complicated, but it's still a very spot-on and fair metaphor for Del's character. Now for Basilio, the symbolism in his name is a little bit more intriguing to me and less on the nose. I mentioned that the most significant part of his name is lupus, which means wolf. I believe the indication here in the track that they were following is to tell us that Basilio is symbolically meant to represent a lone wolf. Now, you might think a lone wolf is just somebody who's a loner, but let me explain the actual zoology from which the term stems from. And really quickly, if you don't know, zoology is essentially just the scientific study of animals. To continue, wolves are actually highly social animals that live in packs, but some young adult wolves end up leaving their pack to form a pack of their own. These lone wolves are called dispersers, and they play an extremely important role for all wolves holistically. They keep wolves healthy by bringing in new genes into the mix with different family groups. In other words, they're the key to the genetic survival of the species. So let's unpack this because there's a lot going on here metaphorically speaking. Basilio is the lone wolf. In the story, he ends up leaving Luis's pack after Del's death finally confirms to him what he's been pondering for much of the game, that maybe Luis's way isn't right. In fact, you could argue that Basilio embodies the lone wolf even prior to Del's death, considering he was already stepping out from not just Luis's ideologies, but his own brother's, in that he begins to voice things about Luis and their current path that his brother won't. To continue, he doesn't just leave Luis's pack, he joins a new pack, that of course being your own. A driving force for him doing so is he wants to ensure that the impending world state is a world where people who are weak like he and Del used to be can survive and have the chance to grow. Basilio's want to ensure the survival of others directly parallels the lone wolf's motivation for striking out on their own, which is to keep the species healthy and ensure that wolves genetically have the capability to survive. So, in other words, philosophically speaking, Basilio embodies the mindset and motivation of a lone wolf or a disperser. We can see this at play in the literal sense in the epilogue, where we see that Basilio has offered a place and function for the people who follow Luis. Instead of condemning them, Basilio instead assimilates them into his pack, dragging along Luis's men and ex-commanders onto a better path. So we can see that Basilio is a disperser in this story, but instead of bringing new genes into the mix, which wolves literally do, he's bringing new ideas and ways of doing things into the mix. And just like the new genes ensure the survival of wolves, Basilio's new ideas ensure the survival of the Parapus people and the betterment of the world. To continue along, in my research I also made a few other interesting connections when it came to Basilio and Fidelio. So, Fidelio's name is the name of the only opera that Beethoven wrote. Additionally, Basilio shares a name with a character from the famed opera, The Barber of Seville. The fact that both of their names have ties to opera is fascinating to me. I'm not sure there's much depth to the symbolism here in terms of the characters, but there's a few nods to it. For example, the climactic moment for the Magnus brothers where Del dies and Basilio fully switches sides takes place in an opera house. Also, it's Basilio's idea to spread word that your character is actually the prince himself, and in the opera, The Barber of Seville, the character named Basilio also creates false rumors about another character who isn't the person that they seem to be. But beyond that, there isn't much here, and I'd assume that the writers for these characters really loved opera and just wanted to include a few references. Part of me wonders if they knew they wanted to have a climactic opera house scene in which a major character would die and then kind of worked backwards from there when naming the Brothers Magnus. If I had to guess, it would simply be that, as there isn't much here. I'd like to conclude this video by speaking to why I think the Brothers Magnus resonate with so many people. I believe the core reason for that is twofold: their relationship with each other and their individual identities. The relationship is something that I think most anyone with a sibling could relate to, in the sense that it's what we all want from our brothers and sisters. They display loyalty to each other above all, in spite of their vast differences, and in spite of the fact that at multiple different junctures in their lives, it would have been easier for them to abandon each other. There are many times that we see Basilio start conversations with Del with, "Listen, I'm with you until the end, you know that, but..." And I think that disclaimer is a really beautiful thing. The term unconditional love is what continuously comes to mind when I think of the Brothers Magnus. As for their individual identities, again, I can see how it's compelling. Basilio is somebody who really resonates with me as someone who is a baby brother of 2 older brothers. On the external, he's the feared destroyer of the army and then your party, but in private scenes, he's open and vulnerable about things ranging from his innermost feelings to his growing doubts about Luis, having seen you and your companions work together up close. I think that his emotional vulnerability and his capability to raise his hand, admit his wrongs, and course correct mark Basilio as a true man in every sense of the word. These are all traits that I believe to be some of the most important when it comes to masculinity. The mental strength and physical fortitude to achieve your goals, coupled with consideration for those with less, and an intentionality about introspecting and understanding your emotions in relation to the world. This is Basilio. He's a true example. As for Fidelio, he's your classic standoffish genius who's more good than he'd like you to believe. He's extremely smart and perceptive, and no doubt his wit is the main thing that allowed Basilio to live and reach his potential. He also seemingly harbors an unrequited love for Lady Juna, and I believe unrequited love to be something that the vast majority of people have gone through at least once in their lives. So we have a character that manages to be both relatable and inspirational at the same time. Relatable in the sense that he self-sacrifices his potential for a loved one and loves someone that he can't have, and inspirational in the sense that he's extremely smart and able to ascertain truths that others just aren't. So with consideration to all of this, I think in many ways the Brothers Magnus complete each other, but I think the point of their characters is that they're not complementary pieces to each other, but foundational pieces instead for each other's formation of identity. Del raised Basilio up and gave him a chance at life, and once Basilio grew into himself, his light is what forced Del to shed his layers of cynicism that he put up in the first place so he can ensure Basilio's survival. So I believe these characters are so popular due to the beauty of their relationship and their individual identities. These boys have awe-inspiring synergy and individual qualities that we should all aspire towards and look to implement within our own characters. Okay y'all, so this video is the third in a series where I'm doing a deep analysis of every major character in this game. Definitely feel free to comment which characters you'd want to see next, and I will take it into consideration. My people, thank you so much for watching. I love chatting and connecting with you all so much. Let's keep things going. If you're watching and you're not subscribed, come right in and join us. Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. You all are the main reason that I make these videos, so if you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and let me know. Check out some of the videos on my channel for more content like this, and have a great day, night, or morning, and remember to be kind and thoughtful. Peace.
Tell. You hear all that? What that cry was talking about?
Yeah. Sounded proper familiar to me.
It's easy to blame the Sanctus Church for the whole thing. But maybe not all of them were happy about it. Makes you think. I remember St. Rella looked like her heart was breaking, seeing us at death's door. Maybe she knew what was going on. Del. What do we believe in, really? Are we absolutely positive that, you know, Count Luis's vision and ours have enough in common?
I thought we were done talking about this. He's the reason we got this far. A couple of Parapus orphans. Nobody else wants us. Nobody cares about us. We'd be nothing without Count Luis.
I know, Del, but he makes all them speeches about equality, but in the end, he's gonna leave the weak to die. I heard him talk about his ideal world, and it sounds like a world where we'd have died alone in the dirt. No Saint Rella to save us. Is that what we're fighting for?
Too late for that kind of talk, brother. Blood on our hands either way.